2019 Blog 135 The Faroes and Iceland Holiday, our 37th trip in the motorhome, completing Scandinavia, Part 1. Diary introduction for this audiobook. It is worth saying that the Faroes has 18 islands connected either via ferry, bridge or undersea tunnel. Some we couldn't do, especially Streymoy, ferry oversubscribed, and the far north islands, as the tunnel at 3.1 m was a little too low for comfort when taking the van through. The Smyril line provide you with a booklet for download of the Faroes campsites. A selection of our fave places where Gassadala Onvaga, Torshavn campsite, views of Hestia, Kaldbak on Streymoy, Vestmanna, Jog von Eysturoy, Hovik, Saxon, both Streymoy, Vikings at Lavik, Trollens on Kalsoy. See the pictures to get a feel. We loved it. A week and a half is probably enough, but you are guided by the ferry timetable. Also, glad we went there first before Iceland. I think on balance it's the right order. Iceland is a magnificent place to visit. Absolutely bowled over by it. Apart from my scary second day morning climbing over the mountain out of Sydisfjordur in driving snow and winds where you could barely see the road, much less that it was surrounded on both sides by frozen lakes, it was all a joy. Get an Iceland camping card if you are staying more than 2 weeks. Sites are plentiful in the east, southwest, western fjords and the north, not so in big stretches of the southern coast. Sites are not great but mostly adequate except for Reyðarfjörður, Ísafjörður and Siglafjörður, which are wonderful. If you are not using the card, it can be very costly. Reykjavik, for example, is not part of this scheme and about £39/night. Take as much canned food, rice, pasta etc. with you that you can fit in your van to control your expenditure. Sadly, whale watching for us at Húsavík was off, foggy, and blowing a hoolie. A selection of our fave places was Reyðarfjörður, east, and areas out to Nordfjord, whole of the western fjords, Vatnajökull NP, Jökulsárlón Lagoon, icebergs Torshavn, north, many of the lovely fjords and waterfalls, the Kerfla active volcano area, northwest, Siglafjörður, north, Húsavík, north, Grindavik, southwest, and as a city Akureyri. See the pictures to get a feel. We went past Sumberg Head, the Shetlands en route. If you would like to read about our time in the Shetlands, see our blog 82. Sunday the 5th of May, 2019. Having packed the van in advance, we set off once again for Harwich. We had booked into the castle inn just outside Harwich, but when we saw that it was just a pub car park, decided against that. We stopped in Harwich town for a good look around, including the harbour area with the boat that rocked from the film of the same name featuring Bill Nighy, the garden areas, seafront, real ale beer festival on the pier, old town areas, most nautical, a nice fish and chip supper, and finally decided to park up opposite the care home on the front. Went to bed early as up early for ferry to Hook van Holland tomorrow. After seeing the campsite last time and this in future, if we are going across to Europe via Harwich, we would do the same. Not really having seen Harwich before, we would rate it a very interesting place with history. Samuel Pepys and the Mayflower, men of war ships built here 1660 to 1827, the tread wheel crane, gill cartoons, house of correction and fab architecture. Monday the 6th of May, 2019. As we were effectively wild camping, we got up early, it was a very quiet night, and drove the short distance to the port and joined the ferry queue for 8 am. The Stena Line ferry was not leaving until 9 am, so we had our breakfast and read in line. The ferry was incredibly empty of passengers, mostly cargo lorry drivers who get sleeping quarters on board. We wouldn't be surprised if this service dies like many of the DFDS services, as just not enough passengers. Eventually, sadly, it will probably only be possible to cross at Dover to Europe, making journeys up to Scandinavia very long. Indeed, this trip is that already. Back in the day when we were in the Orkneys, you could go to the Faroes via Aberdeen, Stromness, Lerwick, Torshavn. Indeed, we did think about it back in the 80s, but as the kids were very young, gave it a miss. Now you can only go either flying from Copenhagen or, as we are doing, ferry from the top of Denmark. On board we sat and read in the cafe and had lunch there. Annie didn't fancy any of the movies, having fallen asleep just when Harrison Ford died in the last one when we saw the latest Star Wars movie in 2016. Keith went to see the Hustlers movie with Rebel Wilson and Anne Hathaway, quite amusing, but I and only one other were in the cinema. On arrival we faced the same issue at the same roundabout with our truck nav, but eventually mastered it and got out of Rotterdam, then drove back to Gouda, missing however the right turning for the Klein America Air behind the library, which meant we travelled the narrow canal side roads. Not clever, lucky no one coming the other way. Eventually got there, parked up, no electrics as all slots taken for that, but no worry, still a very convenient site. Recommend. We walked into Gouda again and visited the cheese shop where they last told us that we had a royal air. We bought quite a few nice cheeses. We love the town of Gouda. Tuesday the 7th of May, 2019. Up early, having part-filled the water tank at the air and set off to join the A1 bypassing Utrecht, Apeldoorn and on to near Osnabrück, where we headed north entering Germany, still on the A1 past Bremen, almost the same route as on the way back in 2016, turned off at K15 through rural Bundberg and on to Heidenau, Germany. It was quite a weird sight and we stayed almost alone in the grassed motorhome section outside the main entrance. However, it had a barrier which was controlled by a payment machine. Took us quite a while to work out what you need do with your credit card, but once in we were okay, filled to the top with water and set up the electrics. The facilities were quite a way off through the bigger site. We had a bit of a look around, got changed and went to the Greek restaurant on site for an evening meal, all very nice. Then to bed. We had driven for about 4 hours and done 270 miles through 2 countries, just a wee bit tired. Wednesday the 8th of May, 2019. Left the Heidenau campsite for Flensburg today, just below the German border with Denmark. Luckily the barrier opened for us and we didn't remain trapped inside that strange campsite field. We had lost all confidence in the auto payment scheme and its automated control. We would never stay there again, although the traditional wooden hut with woodland creature carvings was a joy. Anyhow, it was back onto the A1 and turned onto the A7 near Rosengarten, then bypassed the amazingly busy Hamburg. There is always a hold up there in our humble opinion, and this time was no exception. A huge port had massive roadworks pulling traffic down into one lane most of the way around. When crossing some of the bridges en route we got a glimpse of just how large the port is. I have a certain allegiance to Hamburg as it was the port my ancestors used to escape the pogroms back in the 1880s. After Eidelstedt we turned off the A7 onto the E45 and steadily made our way north from Saxony into the state of Schleswig-Holstein and Flensburg. Here we turned off onto the B199 to the very nice site we had pre-booked at Medelby. We would use that site again to break the journey on our way back from Iceland. Mr. and Mrs. Lund, a nice Danish couple, run the site. We were on pitch 1, huge green open fields, fab facilities block, lots of space, nice indoor pool, although we didn't use it, and outside seating area for an ice cream, which we did do. All in all, a very pleasant stay. Recommended. Thursday the 9th of May, 2019. Packed up after brekkie and left the Lunds, checking out and saying goodbye. We will be back, as Arnie once said. So back along the B199, having had a quick look around the area, and rejoined the motorway E45 up across the border into Denmark. There were a few borders crossing folk at the checkpoint, but they took one look at our number plate, UK, and just waved us through. On past Kodding and Vigil, which we had seen in 2016, and through Aarhus to our Axie campsite at Lisbjerg called Aarhus Camping off Randersveg. It was in a very green area, nicely laid out. We were on pitch 83. Set up and had a good look around and used the facilities. They had nice little huts for kids to play in, a huge outdoor chess set, and flowers blooming everywhere, a very nice sight. We had driven for about 2 hours 10 minutes and 120 miles to get here from Germany. We then left our marker on the pitch and set off to have a look around Aarhus, a university town that we had not been into in 2016. Quite nice in parts but not that interesting. Some unique Danish architecture though. The Danes are so good at design. Have a look at the Danish images if you want to see what we saw in Aarhus. We then returned to our Rohomos area campsite in Lisbjerg. Friday the 10th of May, 2019. Left Aarhus camping site and travelled the hour journey via the minor road to Odum and then back on the E45 motorway, turning off onto the 507 through the big town of Randers. Its huge hospital and bridge across the Gudina onto Hadsund across the Marianger Fjord. At Hadsund we called into a Lidl to do our food shopping. We like Lidl both for price and layout in Goren lands. They often keep the same layout, so it makes it easy for us to find stuff. After stocking up with provisions, it was on from Hadsund to Oosterharup, heading out on the 541 road towards the coast and going along the coastal road, turning at Ars, which was a very interesting old village with nice traditional buildings. It was only 20 minutes to Oosterharup. We parked up in what is quite a touristy area and went for a nice breezy walk around the marina, boardwalks and jetties, plus had a look at some of the for-hire coastal holiday shacks, which all had fab views and Danish style. Quite impressed. This was a true seaside town. We then carried along the coast to Egents, where we waited for and caught the ferry across the Limfjorden to Hals. An interesting experience, as you had to purchase your ferry ticket via a machine before travel, clearly saving them work on the chain ferry for this short journey. What fun! Fab views out to sea as well. From Hals we carried on up the coast to the larger town of Frederikshavn, havn meaning port in Danish. We stopped in the town centre but weren't sure of the parking charges or how to pay, so decided just to drive around as much as we could, seeing the big port area which felt very industrial, so we then moved on to our campsite for the night at Eysturoy. It was only a 45-minute drive through Sindal and some very green hilly terrain. A large site with not many people on it. We set up on the grass with electrics. The first thing we saw was a huge mountain hare, fascinating. As we had arrived quite early in the afternoon, we went for a brief walk around the large site and then returned to chill, listen to music, read, eat, and bed. Happy bunnies, as they say. Saturday the 11th of May, 2019. No rush today, our ferry doesn't leave Hertshal until 3 p.m. Had a leisurely breakfast, packed up the van, disconnected the electrics, wound up the rear steadies, made sure the cable flaps were pushed in, step and waste bucket securely stored away in the side pannier, and then saying goodbye to the campsite guy. He was very friendly. We initially went into Old Dring, parking in the supermarket area for free. Had a good look around the older area and gardens, especially liked the old warehouse. We then set off the short 25-minute drive to Hertshal, Jutland from Horring. We had been here briefly in 2016 but did not visit the port. Some Aussies we met back then were using it to get to Norway. We stopped on the hill approaching Hertshal town to take a lot of photos, then Keith, realizing he had forgotten to bring his hat and gloves and it was going to be cold, went along the port area to a fishing type shop and bought his Icelandic hat and gloves. I am so proud of them. I even wore them at night when we did the NC 500 in 2022 as it was so cold. Blog 177. We then had a good look around town, having paid to park. After that we had lunch and then drove from town to the port to join the queue for the Simral Line ferry. In the queue we saw some outlandish motorhomes, one from guys from Czech Republic which was a true outback almost armored vehicle with solar panels for power plus a huge lorry transporting what can only have been a bridge under wraps. We eventually got on the ship but not without some interesting stuff. Annie had to go on as a passenger, leaving the van and being driven to the gangplank. I waited patiently in line as was the next to last vehicle on the ship, boarding 20 minutes after the scheduled departure time. Scary. Parking was reversing and wedged in as close as possible, but as I am right-hand drive, I had to shimmy over to get out of the motorhome. I carried lots of stuff with me and had to wait ages to get the lift to our floor and our cabin, where Annie had been waiting ages, a little worried that the boat would leave without me, as if, Nice cabin, had all we needed for our 3-day, 2-night boat trip. I think we were on floor 13 but could be wrong. Our ferry was the MS Narono. As it departed, we went outside sunny and windy on deck 8 to wave goodbye to Hertshal, Denmark. Next stop Torshavn, Faroe Islands, Denmark, but the Denmark bit is another story I will cover later. Went into the bar on deck 5 for coffee, cinnamon bun, and Keith bought his new fave chocolate-covered licorice, a Faroese delight. Keith went outside to take some pictures as we went past Sumner Head on the Shetlands, where we had been way back when. See blog 82. Sunday the 12th of May, 2019. At sea. The MS Narono by Simral Lines, wholly owned by the Faroes, has fab food. Whilst queuing for some drinks for us, a guy started up a conversation with us. He lived in the north of the Faroes but had been working away from home in Norway. He was so friendly, and indeed at the end of the trip as we got off in Torshavn gave us a book of the Faroes and his phone number and said if we were in his area come and visit him and his family. How kind is that? Sadly, we didn't have time to do so. Mealtime was allocated by the lady at the door, breakfast, lunch and dinner. On our first dinner the table allocated was already full, so we went back to let her know, not repeating a camping pitch calamity we experienced in 2016, They shifted us to nearby tables with apologies. We struck up a conversation with the folk on the table who were teachers, with fab English, returning with their teenage school party from a singing visit to Copenhagen. They invited us to their decktop concert given by the teenagers at 10 p.m. It was lovely, lots of traditional Faroese folk songs, and they even did a few classic tunes in English especially for us. Just wonderful. We slept reasonably well that night, although as the winds and waves got up it was especially rocky. We found we had to cling on to get dressed. We watched the TV in the room briefly to get a hang of Danish culture, but mostly ads. KeefH watched a Danish subtitled version of Morse, haha. Not one I'd seen before. Monday the 13th of May, 2019. The ship finally docked in Torshavn harbour at 6 a.m. and we went up on deck to get our first views of the Faroe Islands. Just magical, as the sun had already risen. Indeed, this far north in the world at this time of year it hardly even sets. Not sure I'd want the reverse of total darkness in winter though. It took a while to get off the boat, cargo first, and the smell of fish near out van was intense. They carry in frozen storage containers and sometimes they defrost. We drove off the ferry up to the car park by the sports stadium and had a snack and a drink whilst planning what we would do this morning, as not allowed in the campsite until 1 p.m. We then drove back to the harbour area and parked in the car park area by the ferry and had a good look around there, taking many photos of our ship, before it departed for Iceland. We then drove back to the empty car park near the marina and more central for town, looked for pay machines, couldn't find any, so naively assumed it was free. We then went off for a long early morning walk around the marina area and along some of the back streets. Although sunny, grateful for hats and coats as a bitter wind. When we returned, the car park was full of shoppers and workers. We had what seemed to be a parking ticket under the windscreen. As it was written in Faroese I couldn't read it. Asked a nice lady next to us who said we had to pay a fine as we were not displaying the timer clock, which you set to say how long you will be there based on your arrival time. For example, if you arrive at 10 a.m. you set it to 10, then if you are only allowed to stay for 2 hours the wardens know and will issue a fine if you overrun. Clearly as new arrivals we knew none of this, a different culture. She told us we had to pay the fine at the local police station. It took us a while to find it. KeefH had a bit of a row with the chief of police, claiming it wasn't a great way to greet tourists. I had to pay about 200 Danish kroner, £25. The police chief claimed it was the ferry's responsibility to tell passengers of these rules. I told him they hadn't, and if I was him and they wanted the tourist economy he should use his position to influence them. Anyhow, his secretary told us we could get the clock disc from any petrol station, so we did. Now we know what to do, we would not fall foul of that again. Anyhow, despite this totally transparent process, we had a nice morning. Arrived at the campsite, locked, rang the number on the gate, and the lady who lived nearby came and checked us in, and we got coins for showers and washing machines and hooked up overlooking the sea, a lovely view, and a nice sight. Did some cooking, cleaning and washing and then relaxed for the rest of the day. Tuesday the 14th of May, 2019. Had a shower, pretty good facilities. Talked to some folk in tents in the very high winds today. So glad we have progressed to a motorhome at our age. Breakfasted, had a look up at the traditional dwellings overlooking the site and the sea, and then headed back out of Torshavn center along to where they are building the new hotels and turned right out of town. Initially we visited Kaldbaksfjordur, so many waterfalls en route which the drizzle helped to swell. Had a lovely look around, took some photos, so quiet, so peaceful. Even the sheep were trying to get out of the rain and the road. Saw quite a few salmon farms in the fjord. We then decided today we would not use the 550 tunnel to get through the mountain, which became a firm favorite in latter days and often essential. So we turned back into Torshavn at the opposite end and headed southwest to Kakuba. The mist high up was so close to your nose, meaning you could hardly see anything. So glad I was going slowly, as a Faroese guy pulled out right in front of me from a side road going so fast he could easily have hit me. He just didn't see me, a lucky escape but quite shaking, so I drove even more slowly to Kakuba, luckily hardly any traffic. We parked near the bus station, basically the end of the line. Had a look around the grass-thatched tourist house which doubled as a bus terminal. Then we walked up the road to the oldest inhabited house in the Faroes, named Eysturoy. Free entry and very interesting it was. We then walked further up to the now derelict St. Magnus's Cathedral. It had no roof but was under repair as a historic building. It was even true that the nearby Domkirke church, with fab views across to Holmer Island, was also being repainted and repaired after a winter bashing, so we couldn't enter as workmen were busy. What a lovely setting though, really liked Kakuba. The Stromo Island mountains were still in mist as we made our way back to Torshavn, Highway 54, so once again I took it easy and safely. From here we headed out to our campsite at Vestmanna, also on the island of Streymoy, 40 minutes back out of town on the 550 through the mountain and past Høyvik, a place we would later come to love. The road to Vestmanna was so scenerific, we were stopping endlessly to take pictures. We went through Linna and KeefH on the 40 and around the Fab Bay between Valla and Vestmanna, holding the hydroelectric plant on its mountainside, self-sustainability for the locals. The campsite was fine, interestingly with metal hoops concreted into the ground to tie vans and caravans down during high storms, not something I have come across before. The lady who ran the site was just lovely, a sea captain's wife, he being away fishing off Greenland in a huge floating canning factory. You learn something new every day. #nice facilities, nice new showers and inside rooms. Her English was great. We even broached the subject of the whale killing festivals and understood her culture but not the practice. She said dried whale meat was a treat for the Faroese people. We have seen images of the mass blood and culling during their festivals. Not nice for us Brits. Had a very nice stay here, so much so we decided to return later on in the holiday. Wednesday the 15th of May 2019. Now as far as we can go on Stromo Island in the west, had a leisurely breakfast then traversed our route back just past Linna, which we stopped at for both the views and a look at the village or town if you prefer, then on to Highway 40 to join the tunnel, Vegartunnelen, across to the island of Vega. You must pay your toll for the crossing in a petrol station which we did and kept the receipt. It was the price as well for the return journey. Vega Island has the Faroes airport on it and quite a few Americans come over to trek. We decided we were going to see the whole of Vega today and set off up to Eysturoy in the northwest of the island. Initially we stopped at Sandvaga, parked up and walked to the church which like all Faroese churches was locked. Sadly they have had a spate of thefts from churches on all islands, so it was a government directive. We walked over the bridge and had a look around some of the houses, all very interesting. Lots of school kids walking around. It was then back on the road past Myovaga and all the way along the edge of Sovagsvatn. Vatn means lake in Faroese, great views. Then we joined the Buttercup route, road 452, just past Sorfaga. This ran all the way along the edge of the sea inlet, fab sunshine and great views of the island of Tindholmer with its pointy rock side. Lots of pictures were taken. So much better weather today, how lucky were we? There were lots of waterfall and towards the end we got a glimpse of the small island of Glasjomma. We had to take the tunnel to emerge at Eysturoy. What a place. Parked up and went for a walk down to see the cliff edge waterfall called Mjøllfossa. We then came back through the island to have a look at the campsite we had proposed staying on Vega. Just awful, looked like camping on a garage forecourt, so we decided to give that a miss and travelled back through various tunnels to Kaldbackfjord and this time took the coastal road down to Kaldbak to have a look at the ancient church and the village, all amazingly interesting and well worth the visit. We then returned to the site at Torshavn, rang the warden lady and booked in again for 2 nights. It wasn't very busy. We met an American couple who had returned on the ferry from Iceland but because of the cargo going to Hertshall were told they couldn't get their motorhome off in Torshavn and had to wait for it to be returned on the next trip out. They were loaned a car and a caravan whilst in the Faroes. It was their honeymoon. I would have been furious with Simral line, just not acceptable. Thursday the 16th of May 2019. Up early for a shower. Put our coins in, it was freezing water, had to call the lady out, no recompense of money but an apology. These things happen, she got someone out to sort it. Whilst she was there I got her to sort the padlock on the chemical toilet disposal lid. It was still locked from winter, which surprised me as meant no camper up to May had ever emptied their waste unless they did it down the loo. Not good. Anyhow the warden couldn't open it, so I struggled and eventually freed it. The lock had rusted in the inclement weather. So, it was a late start for us. We went back into Torshavn and had a look around the town, and walked up to the Parliament buildings. Then it was back to the Torshavn campsite to relax, lovely views outside our campervan window. Friday the 17th of May 2019, time to leave Torshavn again. It really don't take very long to get anywhere on the Faroes, so as we liked the lady in Vestmanna so much we went back there, this time taking the road over the top of the mountains rather than through the tunnel to the top of the west coast of Streymoy, Stromo Island. Just spectacular views from the top and clear enough, mostly, for us to take pictures. Well, we settled into a slightly different pitch this time, refilling our water which the campsite lady helped us with. what a lovely lady. We relaxed after another walk around Vestmanna, there being some craft shops on the harbour area and some lovely bridges and boats to look at, all in all a lovely day. Saturday the 18th of May, 2019. Said our goodbyes to Mrs. Campsite, sea captain's wife, and returned as far through Streymoy as Oyeringa and joined Highway 10 heading northeast as far as you can go on Stromo. Why it is called both Stromo Island and Streymoy I'm not quite sure, maybe one is English the other Faroese, but who knows. We stopped at Hovig to have a walk around the harbour. KeefH picked some wildflowers for Annie to press in her book. Lovely yellows everywhere, no wonder it is called the buttercup route. At Valvik we turned off onto the single-track road to Saxon where we parked up for a walk around, past the old museum with its grass roof and down to the church on the coast. A nice place. We then returned and carried on up the 10 to Haldesvik where we stopped to see the sailors' memorial and the town houses with goats and sheep kept on a cliff edge. The church was closed but as the vicar was there we asked if we could come in as from the UK, he said yes which was so kind, some lovely views through fascinating windows. Then it was back in the van and on to the end of the road at Jornuvik, a traditional fishing village, parked up with view of the rock stacks known as the Giant and the Witch. We had some food then went for a lovely walk through the village where we came across a Brit who had lived there for 14 years with his Faroese wife. She had wanted to retire there when they retired in Birmingham. He still had his accent. They sold pancakes to tourists. We walked all the way around and along the coast with vegetable plots that would have severe wind bashing. How did they ever grow anything I wondered. Then we left, drove back down and across the bridge from Streymoy to the island of Eysturoy and all the way up roadway 62 to the town of Eysturoy to our campsite for the night on a football field outside the town. Its facilities were the changing rooms, okay if you don't mind a communal shower, haha, but KeefH did use the showers in the morning. We pitched just next to the goalposts, as it was a weekend it was quite busy. We went for a walk outside the site along both the lake and the coast looking for whales. An interesting place to stay. We saw the church as well. Bit breezy overnight. Sunday the 19th of May 2019. Eysturoy Island. Packed up from the football field, no water fill or chemical toilet disposal, so filled all our water bottles in the changing rooms. Very cold wind today whilst packing up, blistering in off the sea, so grateful for my Icelandic hat and mittens. We left but not before hearing the whooper swans on the lake and having one more look and photo opportunity at Eysturoy's magnificent church. Quite a population here and they had 2 campsites. Wonder on reflection if the non-Asai one would have been better, who knows. We then drove the 20 minutes initially to Funninga, a little village off the main road, and then on to the magnificent Gjogv, pronounced Georgi, where we camped for 2 nights. The road was very windy and steep with some very interesting inclines both up and down as it helped traverse the 882 meters high mountain called Slateratindur. Funninga village was off the main 662 and was clearly a tourist visit as we saw coaches, but the approach road was probably too narrow to get down to the car park, not for us, however. Parked up and had a lovely walk around the village, little bridges, livestock, river views, lot of old traditional dwellings, all very interesting. We really liked Funninga. So, then we came back out of the village, traversed our route back up the 662 and turned up to Gjogv up the 632. It is the highest point north in Eysturoy you can get to by road with fabulous views over to the island of Kalsoy which we visited later. Anyhow, great sight. You had to check in up at the huge hotel and gift shop. The motorhome park was out on the cliff edge a bit of a way away. All hard standing, reminded me of Songo Sands, Dunnes, Scotland, see blog 177, although not quite so windy. There was only us and our next door neighbors who were Austrian. We found the key they had provided for us for the facilities block did not work, but as the kind Austrians were leaving they swapped keys with us. The site left the block open initially, which meant 3 coachloads of tourists visiting the village trashed the place. We decided to lock it up after that just for our use once they had been cleaned, and very good they were. Showers, loos, wash sinks all heated with flowers and perfumes and nice smelling soaps. Loved this site. Monday the 20th of May 2019. KeefH cooked breakfast outside on the griddle and even sat out for a bit, blanket, hat, scarves and gloves, reading, admiring Kalsoy views and watching our ferry the Simral line nor on a go past. After breakfast we went for a long walk around the village, all very green and peaty, trad houses, farming, bridges, old school houses and what remains of the old chain hauling system to get down to the very steep harbour bottom. A very nice walk and then back to the site to chill for the rest of the day. This area was probably our favourite in the Faroes, although we do like the town of Torshavn, especially its old Faroese costumes shop. Tuesday the 21st of May, 2019. Sadly, we had to leave our fab views and pitch to at KeefH. We loved it here, so relaxing. Then we drove south through Eysturoy, almost as far south as you could, to our site for the night at Eysturoy. We travelled along the edge of the magnificent Faroes Inlet outside KeefH. The road was flat, surrounded by that unpronounceable mountain, Slateratinda, Tihi. We stopped briefly at Skipanes for a photo shoot on the 662, especially the tulips. This was a halt we would get to know quite well in our time on the Faroes. We then joined Road 10. Got some great views of Skallafjordur Inlet and then turned off past Goteidi onto Road 70, stopping at Sidrugata, Go to KeefH and Nordragata, all very interesting, on our way up to the larger town of Fuglafjordur at the end of the road as far east as you can go on Eysturoy. At Nordragata we had a good walk around the harbour, visited the Blasatova Heritage Museum, but it was closed. Would have been interesting. The sideways standing man artwork along a town square. This artist is famous throughout the Faroes. Can't find his name though. Johannes something, his memory serves me right. At Fuglafjordur we had lunch on the harbour area, which also doubled as a campsite with electric hookup. If only we had no hash campsites. KeefH saw a giant jellyfish in the water. The long jetty had many pieces of rusted metal arches, done to look like whalebone arches, all very interesting. After this we returned back to Highway 10 and down the Skallafjordur with views across to Skala, which we would visit later, and on to Eysturoy. We had to ring for the guy to come and check us in. It was deserted. We did see the start of construction of a tunnel over to Streymoy. We had seen the other end just outside Torshavn. What a difference this will make in travelling times when complete, as it goes under the sea to link the two islands. The site had nice views, was quiet and a great heated room, comfy chairs and big screen TV. After dinner we went to relax in there and watched Faroese TV first. English subtitles helped, haha. Wednesday the 22nd of May, 2019. Left Eysturoy on the 687 going past the current Faroes football stadium, lots of tributes to when they beat Austria in a World Cup qualifier, and just outside town up in the hills and the mist was the remains of the old Viking parliament and settlement, very interesting to us descendants. Then we retraced our route back to Goteidi alongside the inlet, such fab views, and then through Nordragata where we turned onto Road 70 and parked up by the church at Lavik. We walked back to the best preserved Viking settlement in the Faroes for a good look around. We then drove through the Nordoy tunnel which connect the islands of Eysturoy and Bordoy. As the lady warden at Torshavn had told us that many of the tunnels on Bordoy and Kunoy were old and therefore very low ceilings, we decided not to explore any further in these islands but stayed on Bordoy and went straight to the port town of Klaksvik, the largest town in all the northern islands. We had to wait in line for quite a while to get our ferry to the islands of Kalsoy, the one we could see across the water for our pitch in KeefH. It was £44 for the ferry return, not bad for quite a lengthy journey on a small car ferry. So glad we went. We had pre-booked our campsite on the island of Kalsoy in the tourist information office in Klaksvik and had to call in to see Olivia Dagfriofensdotter. The lady I'd sorted all this out by email before our trip. What a helpful lady. We paid the 150 Danish kroner fee. So, we had instructions of where to go to. We arrived at Citadella off the ferry and it started to rain, the mist making it a little tricky to see that well along the coast, Kalsoy being a very long thin island with only one roadway really down its east coast. Stopped at Husar to let most of the locals' ferry traffic past, us being tourists who want to travel at our own pace. We loved the remoteness of Kalsoy. We drove all the way north on Kalsoy. The road up to about Mykladala was fine, but then we entered two very lengthy badly lit lowish tunnels to get up to the top at Tollens, subtitled The End of the World, haha. Parked up with quite a few tourists and went for a nice and interesting walk around the village and across its huge village green populated by many sheep and goats roaming free. We learned that before the tunnel out to Tollens was built in 2010 only 2 families lived out in this remote area, as it was a 3.5 hour up over the mountain to get back to relative civilization at Mykladala. Our views was the village was not civilization either. After Tollens we returned through the tunnel avoiding the school party with torches who were walking back through it with the teacher barking safety instructions. Not great as so dimly lit inside the tunnel. At Miklaidala we pulled up near the statue of Kopakkanen, the famed statue of a mermaid, the seal woman of Miklaidala. Kalsoy is now famous for the place James Bond, Daniel Craig, dies in No Time to Die. We then went to the campsite, which was actually in the car park for Kalsoy United. It had electric hookup, and the amenities building was wonderful. We filled up with water. The wind was strong and chilly however, and our electric cable flapped against the edge of the van for most of the night. Glad we had stayed on the island however, a very interesting place, but I suspect because of the James Bond connection will be so much busier after 2022. Thursday the 23rd of May 2019. Up early, had a shower, wonderful facilities, then drove back along the coast road early back to the ferry terminal, which was just a road queue. As we were catching the first ferry across there were not many people waiting. Got on and showed our ticket and then enjoyed the fabulous view of Streymoy on the Bordoy outcrop. On the ferry on the way back, it had a light dusting of snow even towards the end of May. The ferry journey only takes about 30 minutes. The next few days we were going to stay at the Fuglafjordur harbour campsite and continually return under the tunnel to see all of the outer northern islands, but as the tunnel heights were dangerously close to the top of our van we sadly took the decision to return to the Torshavn campsite for 4 days. We were booked in for the last of those, but I rang the lady warden who said it would be no problem as not very busy yet. So back in Klaksvik we had a good look around. Quite an impressive town it is, the Faroes' second city after Torshavn. Then it was back across the tunnel from Bordoy to Eysturoy at Vikinglavik, also a nice place. Once back at Skallafjordur near Skippens we decided to drive the length of Skallafjord on the other side through Skala to the end at Streymoy and then back. At the time the tunnels back to near Hovik were not built, but I'm sure they are now, which would certainly cut down the journey. It was then back across the bridge to Streymoy, and we stopped for quite a while again at Hovik Harbour, a place we are very fond of. It's on the Buttercup route and is probably the place we have seen the most buttercups. Pulled up the van on the harbour and used the benches provided for lunch and reading in the sunshine. We watched folk repairing their boats and walked around Old Harbour Boardwalk again. Just so relaxing. After Hovik we returned to the Torshavn campsite with our sea view for the remaining days on the Faroes. Friday the 24th of May 2019. Took the van into Torshavn centre and parked in the small car park where the ferry to Kalsoy goes. We watched it fill up and go before walking through town past the hotels and restaurants. We visited the oldest street, costume shop and community buildings, all very pleasant. Then it was back to the site for the afternoon to relax. Saturday the 25th of May 2019. Up early we set off again to the southwest of the main island back to Kakuba. This time there was no fog, so easy driving, where we joined the queue to get on the ferry to Sandoy Island, without realizing as it was a weekend and Sandoy was a favorite spot for the locals to go and they get travel priority. We realized there was a risk we could get there and not get back, and our ferry on to Iceland was tomorrow. This was a risk we could not take, so decided to quit and get out of the queue. We then drove back to the Magnus Cathedral and pulled up for a relaxing time looking at the speedboats in Eysturoy and looking over to Eysturoy Island. All very nice before we returned to the Torshavn site, a little disappointed that we did not get to Sandoy, but also relieved there was no chance of missing the Simral line. We went to bed early. Sunday the 26th of May 2019. We just stayed in the site today and relaxed, lots of eats, chocolate and generally relaxing thing. We went for a little walk along the coast wall and saw the castle, but nothing strenuous. We were moving on tomorrow.
together. I've got some real estate here in my bag, so we bought a pack of cigarettes on Mrs. Wagner's pie. Chicken seems like a dream to me now. Took me 4 days to hitchhike the side of the Holland to look for America. Holland to look for America. Laughing on the bus, playing games with the faces. She said the man in the gabardine suit was a spy. I said be careful, his bow tie